Okay, so thank you all for coming today. This is kind of part 2 of our discussion about the downtown revitalization. So for those of you that don't know me, I'm Melissa Dodd. I'm the city manager. I was hired in April of 2018, so I'm just over the 1-year mark in my position, and I love every day that I come to work. I have the best time at work, and we have the greatest people in this community. The staff, the citizens, the business owners I've gotten to know. I know just about every single one of them in this room by first name, so it's been wonderful, and I love being a part of this. But I just want to kind of talk a little bit about why we're here and what we're doing, and before I turn it over to Jeff to kind of talk about his process and what he did and what he has for us. So I think that it's safe to say that downtown Bellbrook really hasn't changed a lot. If you walk into my office right now, for the last couple of weeks, I've got a little table and it's got old newspaper clippings. I know that a lot of people that have been in my office have seen them and went over and picked them up. It's got a lot of pictures of old downtown Bellbrook, and a lot of it looks exactly the same. And that's not a bad thing. You know, we want to preserve that history, and we want to protect those buildings, and we want to hold on to that identity in the community. And so that's a really positive thing that Bellbrook hasn't changed. But the piece of it that has changed is the diversity of the businesses that are downtown, and just the downtown being able to provide exactly what the community needs. And it's no secret that a successful community has strong retail activity. I think that in the last meeting that we had, the question was asked of, you know, what are some successful downtowns? What are some great communities in the area that we enjoy going to and we enjoy visiting and shopping at? And people were rattling off names, and all of those names of all of those communities had a pretty similar thing in common, which is a really strong retail. And if you look at our downtown, I actually did my own little assessment, and it just sparked me one day. So I did a map, and I put stars on it, and I categorized everything. And I shared this with our planning board, and I broke it down into retail, homes, service-related industries, restaurants, and then government/church. And we've got 94 pieces of property in our central business district, and 71% of it is service and residential. So that makeup alone isn't something that's able to really meet the needs that the community craves with that service and that, with that retail and with that restaurant. We've got 12% retail and only 7% restaurant in that central business district, which goes from Dots to Dollar General, basically, in about a block or two each way, north and south. So that's not a great makeup, and most of our needs are being met from going up to Wilmington Pike and getting everything that we need up there, and that makes me really sad, because that's really not what I feel like the community really wants and needs. And so that was a really eye-opening experience to me, to kind of look at that makeup and really put hard numbers to it. And so that was really interesting. So I thought that I would share that with you. So we want to be able to offer our residents and our community everything that they need, and not give them any reason to leave. That's really what's important. And I'm not naive to the fact that this is a car-centric world. Just about everybody in this, room has one or more cars. I mean, anybody that's over the age of 16 probably has a car. It might not be a great car, or that's the goal, is to make sure that everybody's got a car and they can get where they need to go on their own, so that you don't have to schlep people. And that's just where we live, and we don't bat an eye if we have to drive 30 minutes away to get something that we need. Nobody even thinks twice about it, you just do it. And that's just the day and age that we live in. And that's even starting to change, where now we live in the 2-click world of getting anything that we need with Amazon. You can get your shampoo, your dog food, and your backyard playset all in 2 clicks, and it's there in 2 days. So that's affected the way that, we shop, absolutely. And it also has affected the way that we interact with one another. How much interaction do you have clicking twice on Amazon to get your dog food sent to your house? I mean, there's zero interaction there. And people really crave that interaction, and that's really what's been missing with a lot of these trends that we've experienced in the last 20, 30 or more years, when we've become this car-centric community and the age of Amazon and everything like that. We don't know the people that we're buying our goods and services from. We don't have that interaction. We don't feel that same sense of support of I want to go down to the grocery store because I know exactly who owns it. And fortunately, in Bellbrook, we do have that, and we need to hold on to that. We need to support it. But because of all of those facts that I just listed, Bellbrook has suffered, and downtown Bellbrook has suffered. We lost Penowit Hardware, Bellbrook Chocolate. There were 2 toy stores, an archery shop. There were 3 restaurants that are now gone and totally empty, which was, Gardska's, Bellbrook Pizza Cottage, Frosty Eagle. All those are empty right now. And that's also really sad. And we also have limited social opportunities as well to tie the community back together. I talked about the age of Amazon and the internet and social media and everything like that, where our human interaction has really been replaced by the internet. And we do have the Sugar Maple Festival and the Lions Club Festival, and I hope in my heart that those traditions hold fast and that they don't go away, because those are some of the only opportunities that are left in the community. And so unless we make a conscious effort as individuals to connect with our community, there isn't a lot of opportunity outside of those things. So now that we know what we're up against, what's been done and what are we doing about all of this. So I think that if we stand around today and we look at the community as a whole in Bellbrook, that there have been a lot of positive changes that have happened just in the last year. We implemented a farmer's market. Bellbrook Plaza is holding street fairs once a month. They have arts and crafts, cornhole tournaments, and food trucks. That Bellbrook Plaza situation was a community-driven effort. They saw a need in the community, and they did that on their own. And hats off to that event for going on. And hopefully the community supports that. But that never existed before in the way that it does. Group of local business owners formed for Bellbrook by Bellbrook. They used to meet on Wednesday mornings, and now they meet on Friday mornings with bellhop's changed hours. And it's a group of business owners and community owners that get together, and not only just to get to know one another so that they can support each other and move their businesses forward, but also just to talk about the community and how they can get involved and what they can do. And there's council members that attend. I attend every single one of them that I can. It's a good group of people. There's usually about 20 of them there every week devoted to that. That's a big indicator of just the community's sense to change and their willingness to change and just help any way that they can. Individuals sponsored the purchase of bike racks and benches just to entice people to stop downtown. A lot of people think that the city paid for that, but they didn't. If you look at the little placards on those are all community members or businesses that funded those 100%, which is great. That just is another way that people put money behind an initiative to support the community as a whole. And so to those that haven't really noticed the change or that are kind of skeptical have asked me, why should we care and why should we get involved? And my response is very simple. Why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you get involved with any of these things? Why wouldn't you care about these things? We want to be proud of the community that we live in. We either live here, work here, raise our families here, or all of the above. Everybody is devoted in one way or another to this community. And I found a very relevant quote that I wanted to share by Coretta Scott King. And it's, "The greatness of a community is most accurately measured by the compassionate actions of its members." So we should all care. And that's why we're all here. And I'm so thankful that people are involved and continue to be involved. And I think that this is a big indicator of just that urge to just keep growing and keep moving and make positive changes. And so why are we all here, and why did the city hire a consultant? So if you look at, a lot of people know this, a lot of people might not know this. So the city, when Bellbrook became a city in 1974, they developed a comprehensive plan. And that plan was never updated after 1974. So the community's changed a lot since 1974. And so one of the things, the process had kind of started, there was a walkability study that was done in 2017. And then the city engaged with Greene County Regional Planning. And then there was some transition. My predecessor had left for another position, and I was in the process of coming on board. Greene County, the head of Greene County Regional Planning left, and they were in the process of bringing somebody new on board. So it was a really good time for 2 new people with fresh eyes to kind of pick up this document and really start from scratch and make it their own. So we kind of chose a different path than what was originally kind of gone down. It was full of a lot of statistics and demographics and things like that, but not really anything, that we could really get excited about. So Devin Shoemaker and I and Jessica Hansen, who's here tonight from Greene County Regional Planning, among others, worked really hard on this, and we had a community visioning meeting, and that was back in November. Very widely attended by the community, got a lot of input as to what direction they wanted to see the community go. And I think that it's worth noting, you can find this on our website if you want to look through it. It's actually pretty easy to read, I think. But goal number 1 in the comprehensive plan is the revitalization of downtown. And it says, actually, word for word, downtown revitalization and historic preservation is goal number 1 of the Bellbrook Comprehensive Plan. So this was passed in April of 2019. Was it 2019? Yes, it was 2019. And it was actually passed and put into law via ordinance. So this is supposed to be our guide for moving forward. So goal number 1 is a lofty goal. It's an uphill battle because we are working towards something that really hasn't been really worked on before in the way that we're trying to kind of accomplish things. So we, as the city, decided to hire a consultant, and we've got Jeff Siegler here, and he worked for the Heritage Ohio Main Street program for 10 years, so he worked with a lot of communities all over the state in doing this very thing. So I've never revitalized a downtown. I've never done anything like this before. I know in my heart and in my head the right things to do, but I don't have all the answers. So, and we're such a small staff, our staff doesn't have all of the answers. So I think that, it's very dangerous when you think that you're the smartest person in the room, because you're not. And I think that it's very wise to know when you need to ask for help, and we asked for help. So Jeff Siegler is he started his own consulting firm called Revitalize or Die, and he's worked with a number of communities, like I said. So he is the guy that the city invited in. So he came and met with everybody about a month ago, and he's going to talk about that process, and he's going to talk about his recommendations. So without further ado, here's Jeff.
Thank you. All right. Am I off of this one now or this one? Oh, okay, perfect. All right, nice to see everybody again. Thanks, Melissa, for the warm introduction. Being in a room with you tends to remind me I'm not the smartest person in the room either. So, I think a lot about communities and revitalization and how all this works. You hear people all the time kind of lament, well, it used to be this way here, and everybody has this nostalgia for the way downtown used to be in their community used to be, and wondering, well, what happened? Why are we different? And I've come to the conclusion it's not that people changed. You all haven't decided to be different. Humans haven't changed all that much in 50 years, but our cities changed drastically, and how they're designed and how they function. That all changed, and that's been the part that we grapple with, that the physical design of them and how they function all changed, and it's left people sort of missing what once was. And it sort of dawned on me recently that we had a local economy for the longest time, from the time the city was built up until let's say the 70s or 80s. It was a local economy. People owned buildings here, and people ran businesses here, and people shopped with the people that owned those buildings and businesses. Like the goods and services within a community that were produced in the community were consumed within the community generally. And that works really well for a town. In the last couple decades, we've really transformed, and we've changed to what, for better or worse, what I guess the sprawl economy. And it's very different. It is not locally based. It is based on other people coming in and providing the goods and services. They have all this land, they have these buildings, they run the shops, and we go out there for everything to get all the things we need. And that has been the biggest change, that our patterns of travel, our patterns of consumption, all of our patterns sort of changed during that time, and it's really had a negative effect on our communities. This conversation came up earlier that Dollar General said, well, we're going to come to town. And the community said, well, not looking like that. And they said, fine, we'll leave. We won't ever come back. And then they said, okay, we'll come back and we'll design it the way you want. That's because these businesses, they don't have your best interest in mind. It's nobody from outside of this community really cares what happens in this community. And that's not a bad thing. I mean, that's just the way it is. It's only people from within this community that are interested in what's best for Bellbrook. And as we've kind of let go of that, as we've kind of let other people sort of run our communities and, do all this, it's really, we've suffered. There's a reason why towns have changed and people have changed and our patterns have changed, because all the people now that all do that run all these businesses aren't us. They're sort of outsiders and they don't have a community's best interest in mind, and that's really hurt. That's changed. That's led to people being apathetic. That's led to not enough taxes in the community, property values being hurt. People don't come together as much anymore. It's led to all these sort of negative impacts that I think that when people talk about, well, I miss the old days, we haven't changed, but the design of our community changed. The biggest thing that's changed in the past 50 years that's led to this was shifting to that sprawl economy from a local economy. And so Bellbrook and communities everywhere are kind of to the same point. That we want to go back. We want to go back to having a place where we can walk, to shops that we can walk to walking in the hardware store and knowing somebody, knowing the owner and getting recommendations and that sort of sense of belonging, that sense of hometown, that pride in our community. Those are all wonderful attributes, and a lot of those have gone away. And so that's why we're here, is to how do we get back to that? Obviously you care enough because people keep showing up, and you want to know, how do we get back to that? And that is what I'm here to talk about today, is how we go about doing that. Melissa mentioned the kind of the process that we've gone through. So came in last month, had some meetings, had a lunch meeting with different city departments, toured around the community. Really was fortunate that we're kind of poking around Dwight's property, and he brought us in to see the workshop. That was awfully cool. I had a chance to speak with different boards and committees, then did the public presentation, and the following morning we met at Bellhop and met with some different stakeholder groups, business owners, property owners, etc., and then did another tour. So through that process, had a chance to kind of get a look at everything, meet with a bunch of people, hear community input, find out what people were concerned with, and generally get an idea of what the status is, what the situation here is in the community, and then had a chance to do some serious thinking. Opportunity to kind of sit back and reflect on everything learned and put together some recommendations. So the idea being, what's this look like? If you want to go back to having that healthy local economy and that sense of community, what do we need to do? Well, it's not my job to come in here and tell you all the good news. There's plenty of people that can do that, but I don't think that leads to a whole lot of progress. I think that it's more important to talk about the things that aren't going well, to have frank conversations about the things that the shortcomings, the roadblocks that a community has. And most people don't want to do that, but you don't achieve progress, I think, until you deal with the things that aren't working. So that's what I'm going to try to do, is to point out to the things that I thought could be improved or weren't working as well as they should. We went through this last time. I find it's most useful to break these ideas up into 5 categories. The recommendations, I think that there's sort of 5 major areas that a community can focus on, and it's the most useful way for me to delineate that work. So that is how we're going to go about this. And ultimately, the goal is, if those recommendations, hopefully, are implemented, that you become the place that you want to be, the type of place that either you lament losing or that you aspire to be becomes a reality. And that continuing to do what you've been doing the last few decades obviously isn't getting you where you want. So in changing that and doing new things and trying a new direction, that hopefully you achieve what you do want. The first area is what I call capacity, and that's the community's ability to accomplish things. This, I find, is the biggest, is really common. We had a long talk about this at lunch today. Capacity is usually an issue because most nonprofit organizations or community organizations don't do a very good job. It's through good intentions that I think that leads to bad results. It's sort of the idea of we're a community organization and we want people to volunteer, to get involved. And so anybody that donates any time is valuable and we appreciate it. The problem being with that is when you don't set higher standards, when you say, hey, any volunteer time is great, you kind of set yourself up for failure by not asking more of people. You wouldn't run a successful business that way. You wouldn't hire an employee and say, thanks for coming on board and just do whatever you want. The city wouldn't run well that way. And so a nonprofit, while it's a little different, while a community organization is different, the idea that you need low expectations and low standards, it doesn't work. And we have to have very high expectations and standards for these sorts of organizations. So, I'd ask the question that right now, who's in charge of making Bellbrook a better place to live? And the response so far is like, well, that's not really anyone's job. I mean, the chamber has a role and the city has a role, and there's a lot of different entities that have a role that serve various purposes, but it's not really any one organization's job to try to make it a better place to live, to boost the local economy, to improve, the quality of life. And that's, as you can see, that's a problem. There needs to be that organization there. The community needs to have that function, and most don't. So that is one of the major recommendations, is to have an organization that is concerned with the overall improvement of the community. And that organization needs to have really strong leadership. That organization needs to represent the important institutions in the community. And that, it's not to say that board is just made up of those, but, there should be a lot of those people involved. And, ultimately a strong organization that's making improving the community benefits everybody. It benefits manufacturers, it benefits residents, it benefits local hospital, like across the board. Anybody that has any association with this community benefits from that organization being successful. It has to have the resources to be successful, be that money, volunteer hours, time, energy, effort, whatever. It has to have the appropriate resources to be successful, and it has to have a board that's willing to make hard decisions. Not everything it's going to do is going to be popular, but that leadership has to be willing to make some tough decisions. That organization shouldn't necessarily look like this. It should be representative of the community and the people that live here, of all types. And it's going to be more, you get better outcomes, a better decision-making process when this organizations like these are more representative of the community as a whole. It takes a lot of commitment. The problem with most organizations, when they set up, they look to get the most people involved. So you might say, well, hey, we got to fill this board, we need volunteers. So let's say that, okay, to sit in this board, it's going to take an hour a month, and we'll never ask any money from you. You'll never need to do anything. It's the minimum commitment you can imagine. I mean, you barely even have to show up. Do you want to get involved? As you can see, that doesn't lead to great results. That leads to terrible results. So we have to take a different approach with this organization and be explicit about the expectations. To say, look, you want a seat on this board, it's going to take 10 hours, 15, 20 hours a month. You're going to have to raise money. You're going to have party at your house and invite all your friends over to talk about these things. You're going to have to show up at council meetings. Like, you're going to have to do a lot because it's really, really important. And when we set up an organization being more explicit in terms of what we want, you get better results. All of us in our jobs like to know what our boss wants. Then we can maybe, then you have the ability to meet those expectations. You have the ability to perform. And a nonprofit is the same way. Did I jump too far? So those are the things typically that a good board requires. And people have to be willing to meet those, to get involved. But the thing is, when we ask a lot of people, when we set our standards high, people rise to the occasion. There are people in every community that want to be involved and want to make big change and do something like that. So, don't be overly concerned that if you ask all these things, everybody's going to back away. Certain people will really rise to the occasion. A big part of that organization is regular planning. It's not enough just to get together, and too often those organizations, it's every month is another conversation about the parking problem or this or that. Like, that's not this organization. This organization has to do serious strategic planning, decide once a year what you're going to work on, and the next 11 meetings are simply a review of that. No conversations about this or that thing. We got to be action oriented. 10 times a day I've heard, well, we need more information. We need to understand more. We need to know this. We need to know that. Like, you guys have enough information. The comprehensive plan provided that. There's been a lot of input gathered. I think it seems pretty clear everybody knows what needs to happen. It's time for action. It's time to start taking those steps and start doing and sort of feel comfortable knowing like we have a good idea of what the community wants. And then finally, accountability. All this is worthless if there's not accountability. If anybody that's had pets or children, there has to be reward and punishment, and this sort of organization is the same. That if somebody doesn't hold up their end, if they don't do what they say they're going to do, there has to be accountability measures. There has to be a way to deal with that, to either move them off the board or something, so that they're, if you plan and if you're accountable, then a lot happens. And something really special happens that most communities don't see anymore is progress. Projects being accomplished, momentum, somebody saying, hey, here's what I'm going to do, and then actually doing it. And man, it really is incredible what's possible once you put those different things together, and a lot can happen in a community in a short period of time. The next area is real estate. This has been another popular conversation today, and the thing I'm a big believer that real estate is the key of revitalization. That a community that's full of empty buildings isn't ever going to be successful. That downtowns don't work that way. If there is a bunch of buildings in poor shape that aren't serving any purpose, that nothing is happening in them, nobody's going to go visit those buildings. The point of downtown was always this central marketplace where people came down to get goods and services. If all of a sudden there's none of that happening, if that's not where you go, then downtown loses its whole purpose. But more importantly, the heart of the community then ceases to exist. The place where people always gather and come together and feel a sense of pride, if that no longer exists, as you can imagine, that has a pretty damaging impact on the community as a whole. And I think that that's a bit of where you are right now, is downtown isn't serving that role any longer as the heart of the community. You can look at it and tell it once was. You can look at the structures and realize, like, yes, that's what this was built for, but it's not doing it anymore, and that has a real cost. So what we need to do is find a way to make downtown function that way again. And I think I'm the big believer that real estate is the key to that. So how do you go about making the real estate more productive and getting businesses downtown? Well, one, regulations. You have to use legislation, either existing or new, to try to address the situation of getting these buildings more productive. I think the current condition of downtown is insufficient and probably problematic. It's not a source of pride right now to the community, I don't feel, and it's not housing the types of businesses that people are drawn to. So I think there has to be new legislation to deal with this. It's like, people certainly have the right to store their stuff, and community, people have a lot of stuff, and I think it's fine to find somewhere to store that. It's a decision that's all upon you as a community if downtown is the appropriate place for that. I personally have the opinion that I don't think it's ideal. I think that sends the wrong message and has a real negative impact when we use this heart of the community for something that's probably more appropriate in some other portion, some other part of the community. And there's a real cost to that. So I think there needs to be an honest conversation, and I know that people of. It's personal for some people, obviously, that own those properties. The property rights are an issue that causes a lot of emotions, but ultimately, it's a conversation that has to happen in this community to whether or not the current uses of the current condition of real estate downtown and its current uses are appropriate, and whether or not you want that to change. So I don't have a dog in the fight. That ultimately comes back to the community, but I can just say the current status is not beneficial. Regulations are not a bad thing. We embrace the idea of laws. We embrace the idea of rules. We understand as a society that those are necessary. Regulations are the same thing. They're just laws, they're just rules, and that we use them to try to achieve outcomes collectively as a society that we think would benefit us. But for some reason, if you sub out the word law for regulation, everybody is like, oh, it's bad, it's terrible. No, they're not bad, they're not terrible. We need them, and they help produce the results that we want. So again, I think it's a conversation locally about whether or not that you have the standards in place to achieve the outcomes that you want. But in looking at it from my perspective as an outsider, things probably aren't where they should be. We understand property rights when it comes to residential. Nobody would be shocked if this building was on your block to call the city and say, hey, this looks bad. It's affecting my property values. It's causing, there's unseemly activities happening near there. I'm getting that's very clear that this is not beneficial, that this is unacceptable. It's no different downtown. We should treat downtown commercial buildings the exact same way. An empty downtown building or a downtown building that's falling apart also hurts property values. It also depresses community pride. It also hurts local businesses. It does all those things. It really is damaging, and there's no reason we shouldn't treat it just the same way. I don't think that property is being properly utilized. I think that a lot of it is underutilized. Hang on, where am I? So a good example, when we were here last time, we toured the downtown. It was Thursday between 2 and 4 o'clock. And there was not a single business at that time. And I know everybody, and I don't want to call out any one business too much. I know that people have things come up. I know that somebody's sign said that, there was a doctor's appointment. There was this thing or that thing. But I just want to point out that between 2 and 4 o'clock on a Thursday in June, there was not a single business that was available, like a walk-in type of business. Yeah, the bank was open or maybe a photography store, but that's a type of business that you would pop in to shop. Not a single one was open. That's not ideal. As you can see, because of that, downtown is no longer serving its traditional role as the marketplace, as the heart of the community. The whole idea being is hey, let's go downtown. Well, what do you want to do? Who knows? Maybe get something to eat. Maybe, maybe do a little shopping. Maybe get a beer or a cup of coffee. When there's no business to go down to visit, unless it's by appointment only, downtown stops working and people just don't go and use it. And then you lose that whole idea of that Melissa kind of touched on. You don't interact. You don't see community members. You don't experience that special place that once was. So that's an issue. And again, it's a tricky subject. It's not easy. It's kind of up to you all what you want to do. But I can tell you from my perspective, having no business, a lack of businesses that keep regular hours that are walk-in type of businesses has a real negative effect, and it's probably something that needs to be addressed. Land is being underutilized. I brought this up because there was a lot of conversation last time here. It's well, there's nothing that we can do. All the land that we have is already used up. There's nowhere to build new. Nothing can happen. Well, yeah, yes, all the land is currently owned, and it serves some sort of function, but I don't know that it's not its highest and best use, and there still are opportunities to put in infill to grow. There's plenty of places to renovate, but there also are places for some new business, for some new structures. Again, I get that you can look at these and say, well, that's already being utilized, but there are opportunities to do new things with some creativity. There are places to expand and grow. It's just a conversation as to whether or not that is, something that there's an appetite for, because it's not necessarily the easiest thing to do. So getting back to this idea of real estate, first you've got to deal with the real estate that is that's either vacant or underutilized or an eyesore, or all of that. Like that is a legislative function, but I would also suggest that that's tough for city council to do unless they think the community is in support of it. If the only thing council ever hears is, nope, keep your hands off, that's fine, buildings are in fine condition, don't do anything, that's understandable. But if the community is up in arms and says, no, like, we hate the way downtown looks, it's insufficient, these buildings are a problem, we want it fixed, that gives council the ability to pass legislation to start to deal with it. You need to those properties need to be in the hands of people that are interested in seeing them be productive. Whether you can take the existing owners and convince them it's worthwhile to clean up and try to lease to a good tenant, or whether they need to sell to somebody else that is interested. But the idea is once you have a bunch of property owners that are profit motivated and have some sort of, I don't even think that property owners don't even need to be civic minded. They really need to be profit motivated, but they should also want to try to find good tenants. To a tenant that's going to fit well with the downtown. And those ideas aren't in conflict. Good tenants and like being civic minded and profit motivated by no means are exclusive, that you can accomplish both. So I think one of the things that I think is really beneficial or necessary eventually is to try to cultivate the next generation of property owners or developers. There are people in the community that would love to get into the business of fixing up or building new property, leasing to tenants, and being a property owner / property manager. That's a great way. It could be a great career. But that's something that we have so few of anymore that a lot of people don't know how to do it. And it's been my experience that communities that they realize big-time revitalization, a few people start to learn how to be these developers, how to go through the process. And it's something that you could have people, Jason Duff and Bell Fountain, somebody that could come down and host a day-long workshop of how do you renovate buildings, how do you get finance, how do you do all these things, et cetera. And that can make a big, big difference when you have some of those people overseeing that. Process, we talked about this some last time, that that can be something that gets in the way. I mean, it came up a bunch last time, actually, that because you have to go through Greene County to get any permits, and that's a slow process, that's been harmful. That's done a lot of damage, and that's something that needs to be addressed. Can there be pressure applied to Greene County to make that a better process? Can the city at some point maybe put that function in-house? But, potential investors want a straightforward process. Time is money, and if it's a convoluted process and it takes a bunch of time and wastes a bunch of money, it's going to discourage investment. But it's in essence, it's pretty straightforward. The real estate in the downtown needs to be in good shape and house functioning, successful businesses. And if you go through that process, what's there now? What's the motivation of the property owner? Can we use incentives or punitive action to get them to change their behavior and get that property back in, active again? Then training somebody how to, educating and training some people that could buy that, could renovate it, get it up and active, simultaneously looking at how can the city make sure that process is straightforward. And if you do those things, what you're going to realize is a bunch of property, a bunch of downtown property fixed up, housing successful businesses, housing the type of businesses that people walk down to, that people want to visit, and restoring the community back to its place or restoring the downtown back to its place as the center of community. Aesthetics, the look and feel of things has a big impact on how people feel about it. We all are aware of this. I mean, we all make judgments about people by the way they look, about someone's home by the way they look, and we all make judgments about the way how we feel about a community. You drive through a community's downtown, and instantly you're going to make some judgments about that place. I would suggest that you're probably not putting your best foot forward right now. The downtown might not look as good as you would want, that it's maybe not projecting the image that you would like, and that's an important place where things can be improved. More importantly, though, it's not even as so much about how you feel about or about how somebody else feels about Bellbrook when they come through. I think the bigger cause is when a community doesn't look as good as it should, that it affects how people feel about their own town. You know, if anybody ever run into somebody that just talks trash on their town and is super negative all the time, you know, that has a role in it. If you look at something all the time that looks bad, you start to talk bad about it, you start to think bad about it. So when things look nicer, people have a better relationship, people are proud of it. You know, take a classic car, for example. Like, people fix up their classic car, they take it to shows, they baby it, they maintain it, they do all these things. Your community needs to be treated that way. It needs to be babied, it needs to be shined up, it needs to be maintained and taken care of so that people can all feel that sense of pride in it. So how, you know, placemaking is a part of it. I love the library. The library was adorable. They've done a great job with this idea of placemaking. You look at it, it seems super attractive, it's inviting, you're drawn to it. That's a wonderful example, and that should be carried out further. You know, every property owner should take a note from that, business owners as well. You know, that's aesthetically appealing, it's attractive, and it makes you want to go inside. That's the type of thing that we need all through the downtown. I love this quote by William White. It's difficult to design a space that will not attract people. What's remarkable is how often this has been accomplished. You know, people ultimately want to be with other people. You know, that's why downtowns are important. That's why they function. You know, everybody's been to another city where they have great public space, where there's that place where you just are drawn to, that you want to stop, you want to sit, you want to have a cup of coffee, you just want to linger in that place because whether it's people watching or the mayor mentioned that earlier, mentioned New Orleans. Oh, the great people watching. Like, Bourbon Street's a bit of placemaking. You know, it's fascinating. People are drawn to it. There's food and bars that have a role, but it's also a really well-designed, interesting place. And there's plazas. It's, what's the plaza? There's a plaza right off Bourbon Street in the quarter, that is beautiful. I mean, it's always packed, it's always full, and it's absolutely amazing. You need those type of places where people are drawn to and want to sit and linger, and that pulls people in. Plus, the other thing, when you have those sorts of places, it increases commerce. You know, more people mean more sales. More sales mean higher, you know, property values and rental rates, et cetera. You need those sorts of places because it really has a big impact on the economics. I think Bellbrook kind of lacks that place and would benefit from considering how to have a little bit more of a sense of place. And here are just some examples of good placemaking. And, you know, they're not all expensive. They don't all have to be these huge, you know, European plazas. They can be string lights and benches and paintings and flowers. I mean, there's thousands of examples of communities doing really outstanding placemaking on a shoestring budget. So there's a lot that can be done to really completely transform these places, to make them inviting, that draw people in, that make people proud, and kind of warm up to your community. Cleanup. This was kind of a funny photo. There were the trash cans last time we were here were situated right in front of the bench. It didn't make for the most inviting place to sit, but I understand how that goes. But going back to this idea of appearances shape people's opinions. Everybody feels, you know, in March you hate your yard. I mean, I go through it every year, like, oh my God, I can't believe how hideous my yard and house is. It's the worst. And then a month later, as everything's blooming and you know, you plant some plants, the lawn comes in, you love it. It feels great again. You're proud of it, and it's something that matters. Or, you know, when you clean your house, it makes you feel better. The community is very much the same. As you go through the process of just doing simple cleanup, it changes the way you feel about it. You grow more proud of it. You feel a stronger connection to it. The people that volunteer feel great about that experience, and anybody that sees it. So, you know, simple cleanup can go such a long way to changing people's relationship to their town, and I think it's really something important to start to consider how to incorporate. Because there were places that, like, some of that's a little gross, you know, and that's not putting off maybe the image that is what you want. Signage is another area. You know, signage could be improved. That's another aesthetic area that matters. It shapes how people feel about things, how things look, and a good ordinance can go a long way to having a cohesive signage package. There's this desire that I'm going to have the bigger, better sign, and that will be how I sell my business. Then eventually you end up with a ton of clutter, and nothing looks good, and it all gets drowned out. A good signage ordinance results in people having a cohesive. That one is. Sorry, is it up yet? It results in people having, cohesive, consistent signage that looks really good throughout. When the similar materials, similar size, similar massing, that makes everything look really attractive, and in the long term benefits all those businesses. This one is kind of funny. I feel a little bit bad, but I'm picking on. But this one made me laugh. Can you see it well enough to see the sign is tilting? Can you tell why it's being pushed over? It's like a huge weed. It seems like some plant is pushing it over, which I thought was sort of funny, being it's the lawn service company. So, and it's not, it's not mean-spirited. It's not meant to be cruel. It's just to point out sometimes we look past these things. There were projects in my house that I overlooked for 5 years, and one day went to the hardware store, and I solved them all in about an hour. And it was just silly how long I overlooked these things, and I don't know why I did it. I don't know why I didn't pay more attention. I don't know why I just didn't do it, but it felt great to fix them. It's kind of the same. It's easy. I don't doubt that this person has a ton of pride in their business and probably hasn't paid that much attention, has walked past that a million times not thinking about it. It's important to try to look with an outsider's perspective to say, how does this, what's this look like to others? And to take a good hard look at that and say, that's an easy fix. I can do that. And it's easy to kind of get in the habit of overlooking those things. But remember that other people do see it. And here's just an example of trying, a little bit more of it's not a great example, but a more cohesive signage package that nobody's store window should have 50 print-offs in it. There shouldn't be stickers everywhere. I mean, there's a lot of things that don't look good, that have a real impact on the way downtown feels and a business feels. And I think it's appropriate to put in the type of legislation that it's not saying you have to have a sign that looks this color or that says this thing. It's more so just, the sign should fill no more than 30% of your window. It should not be backlit or things like that help provide a little bit more of a quality thing. And I think it's important to mention, this, I think there's a tendency to say, well, when we do that, we're not going to attract any business. If you tell everybody what to do like that, nobody's going to want to come here. But I disagree wholeheartedly. It is by doing that you become much more attractive to good businesses. A good business wants to be located in an attractive place because they know that that's going to foster foot traffic. That to put a business in, Short North, for example, Columbus, there's probably a lot of rules, but you also know you're going to get a ton of foot traffic. You're likely to have your best chance of making sales. So in having rules and regulations, you really are creating an environment that's conducive to business, not the other way around. And so that argument is never ending, but I'd like to do our best to put it to bed. Regulations can be very helpful for businesses, and it shouldn't be just seen as a bad thing. Community-ness is the idea of that, a sense of community, of people getting together, and that's something that's often lost as we've pulled apart, as we get in our cars more, as we double-click for Amazon purchases, et cetera. We don't know one another as much anymore, and that comes at a real cost. People don't feel as connected. There's crazy studies showing the high cost of isolation in our society and how that's affected people's mental health. But it's more enriching. It's more satisfying to. Statistics show that the biggest factor in people's happiness is their sort of those casual acquaintances. It's not your spouse. It's not your job. It's the number of people that and have that sort of neighborhood relationship with. And that's really important. If people, as you know more people in your community and are more connected, you're much more likely to care about your community. No one's going to bat for Bellbrook because they think that the city staff is the greatest in the world. I mean, I have to say I'm a big fan, but you care about your community because of the other people. And we have to foster that sense of community so that people get involved and care about their community. So, ways to go about doing that is getting people together. Obviously, you do that great with this event, but having regular events that occur every month or every week even, but getting people together, giving people a reason to turn off Netflix and go visit with others. I started a book club in my community, and I love it. I meet with a group. It's a guys' book club. We get together once a month and discuss different books and have a lot of beer, and it's awesome. I love it. I ran a kickball league when I lived in Lancaster, and it was amazing how much. It seems stupid, the idea that there was 200 adults playing kickball, and you wouldn't think that would matter. The positive benefits that came out of that kickball league are still affecting that community today, and what it meant, and how many people got to know one another and then became more passionate about their community. I mean, there was a building that the city wanted to tear down, and if it had not been for this kickball league, which again seems ridiculous, this building would have been torn down. And it was recently, it had its grand opening about a month ago, and it was a $4 or $5 million renovation. So like those small networks, those getting people together can have profound impacts. Empowering people. This is an example from Grand Rapids, where Grand Rapids was struggling with a lot of things, and somebody went to council and said, hey, I'd like to have set the Guinness World Record for the biggest pillow fight. Might make people feel nice. And city council's like, yeah, go for it. And it's been a big event. It's again, one of those things, like, it seems silly that a pillow fight would ever lead to anything. It's led to a lot, and it's led to people caring, feeling less apathetic and getting involved. So I think it's really important as a community to try to start saying yes to things, to allow some creativity, to allow people to get involved and do some new things. Ownership. So much of our community has been handed over to outside interests. We have to start fostering ownership again, finding ways for people to start new businesses, to operate businesses, to just different ways to foster ownership again and get people to have a stake in the community. A farmer's market is a good way to do that. Fostering responsibility. It's funny how there's simultaneously these two sentiments, like, well, government's bad, government's the problem, but anytime anything happens, it's like, well, when's the city going to fix it? When's the city going to come and clean this up? What's the city going to do about this? Like, well, the city has a role to play, but the city isn't 100% responsible for everything. And we have to start to foster a sense of personal responsibility. Property owners need to take care of their property. Business owners have a responsibility to take care of their business. But you have a responsibility to your block and your community as well. And if it's not how you would like it, it is up to community members to change that, to get involved, to take responsibility. This is an example in Sterling, Illinois, I think, where the city worked with a local organization to purchase this trailer. And this trailer is full of cleaning supplies, like rakes, brooms, paint, rollers and paintbrushes and all these things that if you're a community group, you can use this for free. You can say, yeah, we want to use it on X day, and the city will drop it off on your block and you can use it for free. What a great way to empower residents to get involved and start to clean up. Finally, identity. The idea that part of a community, one of the ways that we can be proud of something is it having an identity. It's really easy to support your local sports team because they have a shirt. You can get a bumper sticker, you can get a hat. It's not so easy to support your community. So it was great to see this T-shirt where somebody had the ability to support their community, and we need a lot more of that. We need to foster this sense of identity because it really becomes easier to be proud and celebrate a community when you do. Heritage is always going to be a part of that, to make sure that people, educate people on a community's heritage. We get a lot of pride from knowing our roots, and when we lose our roots, when we lose that connection to the past, it changes people. We care less, and so it's really important to start to find ways to, re-educate people on their roots, on their heritage, and celebrate those things because it really does matter. Tell your story. Social media is an incredible tool. You've got a brand, whether you know it or not. It's better if you dictate what that brand is than outsiders, and to use these different tools to start to tell the story of your community the way that you want. I'm a big believer in traditions. Families that have traditions are stronger, they say, and I think that communities that have traditions are a lot stronger. And this was one that, going back to my time in Lancaster, we started a tradition. I worked for this community organization that was every Thanksgiving morning, we would hike up to the top of this little mountain in town, and that was it. It was not like, it wasn't a fundraiser. We weren't, doing anything cool or creative. We walked up to the top of the mountain, had a cup of coffee or whatever, and it was the coolest thing. It started with about 4 of us. There's a photo from last year. I'm not even involved in it any longer, and there's obviously a few hundred people, and it's such an emotional thing. For whatever reason, you get up there, and it brings tears to your eyes that they're like, oh, hey, here's all these people that I share a town with that also love this place, that it matters enough that we got together. It's incredible, and it's hard to describe, but traditions can be very, very important part. So I would suggest, see if you can't dig up old traditions and start to find new ones, because they really they help change that bond, that relationship, and foster that richer sense of community and belonging that people want. Next is events play a large part. Think about the events that you have, or if you want new ones, and they can sort of add to that identity. If you're an all Italian community, I wouldn't suggest a German fest. Think about the type of events that might lead to more pride, to help further deepen those roots. And what could be done. I think that events can be a really good strategy. Next, going to gear. You have to give people the ability to wear, to show their support. And I think apparel is a great way to do that. People need to demonstrate that they support their community and not just their sports team. This is a bit of a new endeavor, but this is a shirt that I designed. It's Neighbor Hoodie was the idea. It's a hooded sweatshirt with the word neighbor, use the Mr. Rogers font. And I have come to realize that communities really need this, that they need apparel. In a lot of communities, they don't have anybody that makes community-minded apparel. And so I've actually designed some and put it on my website, Revitalize or Die, and I'm going to basically do that for any community that asks, and start designing shirts, sweatshirts, whatever, that are community oriented, and still in talks with the city about it. We'll see what to do. But what I'd like to do for all the sales, I've designed a few different shirts and whatever, to take 50% of the proceeds from that and turn it, give it back to the community for a local project. So again, this is kind of a new idea, but I realize that there is a real lack of a way to support your community as a whole. The Clevelands and Pittsburghs and so on, there's a bunch of t-shirt shops in those cities that make community-minded gear. Most small towns don't, and I'd love to try to fill that role, but I also want to make sure that there's a way to give back. So and if you see under the E and I, it says Bellbrook. So we'll talk more about it, but the idea being that it's a way to get community-minded apparel and give some money back to the town. Finally, this is kind of separate, but there was a lot of concern about the parking issue last time, and I just wanted to quickly address that. Oh, whoops. There was a silly GIF at the end. In any case, the point was, it's probably time to put the parking issue to bed. There's not a shortage of parking. There really isn't. It's often people's assumption that, hey, downtown's not doing better because there's a shortage of parking. There's not. There's just not. There's no proof of that. The street parking was all wide open and all the lots were empty. So there's just not a shortage, and the longer that we try to focus on how to solve the parking problem, the longer we keep from addressing the real issue. So I do hope that you will say, let's put off parking till a later time. When someday if there's a shortage, excellent. If you drive downtown on a Thursday afternoon and there's absolutely no place to park, congratulations, you've done something amazing. But until then, like, just hold off on worrying about it. So all that is to say, like, I got the easy job. I get to come in here and say, here's what you should do. I leave, and I don't have to go about implementing it. The tough job falls to you. You can ignore all this, and that's fine, but what I'd say is that what you've been doing probably isn't producing the results that you want. So you should probably do something different, but that ultimately falls back to you. It won't be easy. It's hard, it's complicated, it takes a lot of work, and more importantly, you're probably gonna make some people mad. You probably have to make some decisions that people won't like to make some progress, and you're gonna have to do things differently. But what I would suggest is it matters enough. The idea of restoring the local economy, getting local people back in ownership positions, restoring a sense of community, and helping feel proud about their town is the most important thing I think that you can do. So I do very much believe, seeing in what I've saw the last, over these 2 visits, that I 100% believe that there is the passion and energy and desire to do just that. So with that, I'm gonna turn it back over.
Tripping so far. I've still got to go down now. I shouldn't have said that. Okay. So thank you, Jeff. So one of the things that I want to do is just kind of talk about some things that have happened just today and kind of where we go from here also. So at noon today, there was a meeting for anybody that was interested in participating on a potential board or organization, whatever that's going to be called. And there were about 20 people that showed up. So that was awesome. There was a really good representation between property owners, business owners, residents. There was a pretty good cross-section of people that showed up to that. So that's going to be spearheaded by the community itself. That's not going to be something that the city organizes, and that's going to operate independent of the city. I would absolutely be involved. And then, anybody else from the city that would make sense would absolutely be involved. But that's going to be a grassroots community effort. There was already somebody that stepped forward and said, I am more than happy to help this thing get organized. So there's already momentum building just since noon today. And even the last time that Jeff was here, like he said, day 2 of his visit, there were some community meetings. And a number of people came up to me and said, why do we have to wait for him to come back? Can we just do these things now? Like, can we go ahead and start doing some of these things? And I'm like, hold your horses. I love the passion, but like, we need to make sure that what we do is very focused and makes the most sense. And so I know that this community is really ready for some positive changes, and it's super exciting. So I will pass on any information that I hear about this community organization. I'm sure that it's going to start to be spread through the number of channels, but this is all still in the early stages, but there are a lot of people really excited about that. Jeff also met with council and the boards right before this to just talk legislation, talk about some of the things that they can do from a policy standpoint that would help some of these things. So they talked about some of the logistics stuff. So we have a lot of the framework in place. We have the comprehensive plan. It's clearly outlining that we need to focus on the downtown, and a lot of these recommendations are going to help us do just that. But it's going to take work from everybody. So yes, there's going to be a community organization, but we need action from everybody. And what does that look like? And I think that there have been a lot of really good examples. Start a local kickball tournament. Start community cleanup on your block. A lot of people are going to be able to volunteer time, money, knowledge, effort. I mean, there's lots of ways that people can, just pitch in and help. It might just be speaking positively about the efforts going on in the community, or friends, just spreading the word. That's a super easy thing to do, and that helps build momentum also. Shop the local businesses, support those that are moving the needle forward, get engaged, make sure that your voice is heard. Those are all great ways to get involved. And I know that everybody wouldn't be here tonight if they didn't care and if they didn't want to be involved. So it's going to take a lot of work, like Jeff said, and it's going to be hard. And I'll just kind of point to one of the projects that kind of happened organically. we had the plaza, and we had one of the entrances to the plaza that went into the dairy shed. I'm sure that everybody's drove through there a million times or drove by it and saw the long line of kids and, got really nervous because it wasn't a really safe situation. So I had started to have some conversations about that entrance, and the decision was made to shut that entrance down, close it down, put some potted plants out there. That was a really good example of a community effort, and that was met with a little bit of resistance, and it wasn't exactly, the smoothest thing to happen, and it made a lot of sense to a lot of people, but there were some people that were still upset about it, and change is hard, and that entrance there has been closed since Sugar Maple Festival, and so it's been a couple of months, and since that one decision was made, if you go through there and look at it today, just the plaza area, one decision to close one entrance point. What's happened since then has been the entire thing has been repaved, restriped, remarked. It looks a whole lot better back there. What else has happened? The dairy shed painted, they hung up some lights. Like, one small thing has a domino effect. And, none of this stuff, is real earth-shattering things that are happening, but these are really small community efforts that are having a domino effect. And somebody looks at what's going on over here and says, well, that was an easy thing to do. Why don't we do this? I mean, I just got a text message when I was in here, like, why don't we take the old city garage, open up the door and make it a place, like make it a placemaking place? And I'm like, this is amazing, yes. So, I mean, it's amazing what just small things can start to do to make changes, and that's what this is all about. Like, nothing's going to change overnight, and it's not going to happen from the city alone. It's going to happen from everybody rolling up their sleeves and caring and helping. And so I just want to task everybody with just supporting any way that you can this community and these efforts, and just doing what you can and what is within your ability to do. So with that being said, we will open it up if anybody has questions. We have a lot of work to do, and there's a lot of things that the city can do. There are a lot of things that residents can do. So we are more than willing to take a couple of questions if you're interested in asking anything. There might be some things that we can't answer right now, and just be prepared for that, because this is a learning process, and at the end of the day, we can ask questions of Jeff as to what would he do, but what works in every other community that he's worked with might not work here. So we have to keep that in mind, that this is our community, and every community is unique in its own ways, and things that are supported other places might not necessarily be wanted and supported here. So we have to keep those kinds of things in mind. So we really have to think about what we want as a community versus somebody telling us what we should have. I think that he did a really good job of giving us some things to think about. And I think that that's a really good start to all of this. So we've got a lot of work ahead of us, like I said. But if anybody has any questions, we've got one of these things. So I don't know. We're kind of small. You can try it. And if we need it.
So Jeff, do you have any? You didn't touch on it tonight, but last time you mentioned about the idea of a community having something that draws people from other communities down. Would you want to mention anything about that?
Yeah, I mean, my opinion on that is there's the tendency to try to, communities have a tendency almost to look for sort of a gimmick to fill that role. I'm not in favor of that. I think what draws people to a place is a pretty downtown full of businesses. I mean, you think if you had a butcher and a baker and a little card shop downtown, like that would draw people. That's funny, because that used to be the standard. Now that's so unique that people would be drawn to it. Like, oh, I don't want to go out to the Pike. I want to go. So I think it's just a matter of some well-run little businesses are what draws people in. Simple as that.
I have one question. Your comments about underutilization. Probably one of the nicest buildings in downtown Bellbrook is the shopping area on the far west side of downtown where Garska's used to be. It's probably the nicest building downtown. The restaurant that was there has been gone for a long time now. I don't know if it's ownership issues, what they're using as a tax write-off. Do you know of any legislation out there that can force or move along the process of, landowners and maybe assisting them and filling in?
Funny you should mention that. Xenia is a good example of a community that passed legislation like that. It's called a vacant property registry, and they passed it within the last couple of years. And it basically it's a means of dealing with that. If somebody owns property, but it's not being utilized, if it's basically vacant, it's a means to deal with that. And ultimately, it's if you have vacant property within the district that the legislation is created around, you have to pay a fee. That fee increases over time, and it's been a really effective tool at dealing with vacant property. I'll say it's, from my perspective so far, opinion and meeting with the community, nearly everybody seems to support that idea. But not to be surprised, and as it should be, some people don't like that idea. It's not going to be popular amongst everybody, but there are absolutely tools available to deal with that.
All right, so.
Oh, I think, did you have? Okay.
So I just want to thank everybody again. I think that Jeff did a great job of really spending time to listen to everybody and making himself available. He's got a report on the recommendations, and I will get that up on our website probably the first of next week. I want to make sure that I have a chance to review it and council has a chance to review it, and we'll get that on our website. This is being recorded tonight, thanks to Miami Valley Communications Council for that. So this will also be up on our website for anybody that couldn't make it. And we just want to keep this momentum moving forward. We just don't want to, have these presentations and have these conversations and just stop. So just hopefully some people have been sparked through this process and are interested in, doing the work and moving this thing forward. So I thank everybody, and I always have an open door and phone line, and I'm always willing to talk to anybody that wants to talk about this stuff, because it's probably my favorite thing to talk about. So I thank you guys all so much, and have a good evening.